This abortion stuff is getting really messy.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Great to have you aboard. Thanks very much for tuning in. Tonight we're going to dig in a little bit to the abortion challenge here in Rhode Island. It seems to me that a few sentences could advance a bill that is sitting in the legislature right now after a 5-4 vote turning it down, meaning legislation that was expected to get passed here in Rhode Island has been stunted because a 5-4 vote in the Senate Judiciary Committee did so. And it's got everybody on pins and needles, and there may be some remedy in the session. I'm not sure. The politics are becoming ferocious. So we will talk to a longtime state senator who was one of the no votes on the latest version. Frankly, I think his logic on it makes a lot of sense. So we'll dig in with Lou Raptakis in just a few moments. Glad to have you aboard again. As I said, I will leave a little bit of time at the end of the broadcast tonight to just share a loss of sorts, well, a loss no doubt, but a moment that will escape me on a, I don't know, 2 or 3 time a week basis. You know, I do a lot of political dialogue here, and people are always asking me questions out in the field. And I generally don't speak much because I think I say enough here and on the radio weekdays 3 to 6 on WPRO. But I certainly will be tested a little bit less after the loss of a good friend from the gym, and we'll talk to you about that at the end of the show. In the meantime, here is a headline that I think you've seen a lot of lately, but the reason that I bring it up again is that the evergreen reaction has been significant from the political community and the media community. Governor Raimondo signed into law this continuing contract legislation, which in essence just enables the existing wages and benefits from a current public employee contract for teachers and public employees like DPW and the like, not fire police because they have an arbitration system, but leaves it in perpetuity until such time that a new contract is drawn up. It is really tough legislation for maintaining the financial stability of local communities, and they continue to say something about it.
Governor Raimondo has signed a bill that would allow teachers and other municipal union members to keep wages and benefits under their current contract, even if it's expired, while negotiating a new one. The governor had previously vetoed a bill that proposed to keep their whole contract intact. This one, she says, is a compromise.
And so this bill says it's just wages and benefits, which means, and it still leaves the mayors with a lot of levers. They can do layoffs, they can change schedules, they can change, programming.
She said the bill leaves lots of incentives for both sides to come to the bargaining table, but North Providence Mayor Charles Lombardi disagrees.
I can negotiate. We've been here for 12 years. Everyone seems to be happy. I don't need anyone from the General Assembly to come here and tell us, or our town, how to negotiate.
The mayor added this affects taxpayers' pockets when the unions ask for raises in their next contracts.
This keeps wages stagnant. This does not give raises. So I think the mayors are probably protesting a little bit too much. National
Education Association Rhode Island Executive Director Bob Walsh also argued the law only restores what was standard practice until about 10 years ago.
You know, when we get down to some recognition that the pension problems we have in the state are so enormous, there's going to be less capability for local mayors to make tough decisions. I mean, our pension liabilities, this is not the state pension that was reformed years ago by Governor Raimondo and the legislature. This was, she was treasurer. This is a local municipal pension liability that is valued now at $2.5 billion with a B dollars, and a health benefit liability valued at the same. And somewhere along the line here, local mayors, town administrators, those who run your communities are going to have to step up and say, no mas. And now they have no place to say no mas, at least for now. It's not just about salaries. It's about also taking the discretion of local communities away We have a local control constitutional rule here. Home rule, it's called. And the legislature just took it away. Governor Raimondo got a headline today in the Providence Journal. And you know what? She deserves it. So does the legislature. Alrighty. This abortion situation is crazy right now. This CNN headline talks about Alabama. In Alabama, they've decided that they're going to make abortion illegal across the board and not even an exception for a case of rape or incest. Doctors would be jailed 99 years if convicted of performing an abortion. There's just some limited exclusion for serious health issues on the part of the mother. This is an attempt with a 6-month window for it to start in Alabama to send this legislation to the U.S. Supreme Court to try to affect and gain the momentum that is perceived to be there with a 5-4 conservative majority right now. I'm not so sure they're going to get what they're looking for, but it certainly is creating tumult across this country. In the meantime, here in Rhode Island, we have this controversy that occurred at the Senate Judiciary Committee in a slim 5-4 vote to turn down a bill that a lot of the folks here in the progressive movement in Rhode Island were absolutely counting on having been passed. Here was Eyewitness News' latest on it.
A dramatic scene unfolds in the Rhode Island Senate Tuesday night as pro-choice protesters demand a vote on legislation to codify the right to an abortion into state law. The Senate Judiciary Committee voting down one bill that would have done just that, a major win for pro-life advocates who were also demonstrating at the State House Tuesday.
To discuss it with somebody.
But the debate is not over yet. One bill, the House-approved Reproductive Privacy Act, was held for further study by the Senate committee Tuesday night. It now has two potential paths. One path is short. No further vote is taken and the issue of abortion is off the table for the year. The other path is more complicated. The Senate Judiciary Committee could pass an amended version of the bill, which would also need to clear the full Senate. Then House leaders would decide whether to hold a vote in their Judiciary Committee, setting up a final vote on the House floor to send the bill to the governor's desk.
Roe has been the law of the land here for 50 years, and I think it ought to stay that way. And I think the legislature should take action to do that and put people's minds at rest.
But some lawmakers question the urgency.
I don't know why there is a rush, since nothing has occurred that would restrict abortion here in the state of Rhode Island.
He is there and he is here. Senator, good to see you.
Thank you, Dan. Pleasure to be here again. As
Tough
always.
issue. It's one that I thought a lot of people probably would rather see. I think a lot of people would rather just see stay on the shelf. But the worry that people on the left or the women's rights activists seem to have is that any moment now Washington could go the other way. Now Alabama's recent push kind of buoys that argument, but let's leave that aside and we'll talk about that in the next break. You voted no in the Senate Judiciary Committee on this bill, meaning you voted against a codification of Roe v. Wade. Give me your executive summary on why you did, and then we'll kind of elaborate in the next segment or two.
Basically, if we were to copy the exact law of the land and various statutes in Rhode Island, I think we wouldn't even have this discussion. But they keep using the word codify. Codify is not copy. Status quo is what should have been done. And I'm going to blame the other side, thinking that they had a great victory in the House and thinking they were going to have a great victory in the Senate, thought that there was no room for negotiation. You and I know that any piece of legislation in the General Assembly, when you have two opposing sides, needs compromise, and they felt that even up to Friday, Senator Golden, in the media, stated she didn't want to negotiate. I give credit to Senator Archibald and Senator Lombardi, who as attorneys dissected the exact language that should be needed to have a resolution.
Well, that's kind of getting into the meat of the sandwich, which I want to do a little bit later on. But for the most part, you're showing that clip, and I think your overall message was there's no rush.
I'm going to tell you why. First of all, today a woman has a right for an abortion. There has not been a court challenge in the Supreme Court. We know what happened in Alabama. We know what happened in Missouri. We also know on the other end in Vermont, they've gone to the other extreme. But there's a process. Historically, it took from December of 1971 till January 22nd of 1973 for the case of Roe versus Wade to be introduced and adjudicated in the court. A year and a month. The General Assembly in Rhode Island, we sit on a 6-month calendar. We're in January, we recess around June 30th, and we're back in January 2nd, and we can pre-file legislation on November 15th. So we're looking less than 6 months. I doubt very much a decision is going to be made. And let's even further...
A decision made on the U.S. Supreme Court level.
Correct. And let's even take that even further. What happens if we pass this legislation?
Hold the thought. What happens if we pass the legislation? And next.
The Senate President has allowed this legislation to remain, and there's a possibility something could be worked out, but I don't know. I remain very open-minded, and I remain willing to work on any type of compromise language.
Do you think that there will be a resolution by the end of the session?
Hoping that's the case. Hope springs eternal up here. You never know what's going to happen. But we're hoping that we can sit down and get all the parties together and build a consensus.
Well, it's interesting that the Senate President would say that. The first voice is that of Stephen Archambault. He is the 5-4 voter. I mean, it's funny how you count these things. I mean, if you were holding out, you'd be number 5, right? But you had established that you thought there was time to wait. You were on the record. He was a pro-choice candidate for re-election. He proffered that he was going to support this legislation in general. Something got to him in terms of the actual language, the quick child language, which is part of our statutory setup right now, which is interesting. Quick child is viability in old time language and statutes, and there's penalties for impacting the life of a quick child when there's assault or, God forbid, homicide of a mother, which really clogs up a lot of what's going on here. This new legislation would remove that old legislation. I think that old legislation could be refined, don't you?
Correct.
And I think that's what Senator Archambault was saying. Anyway, he held out, ended up being the 5th vote to say no. Now we have what we have. You were saying, prior to the break.
And what happens if the Supreme Court, the Alabama decision goes to the Supreme Court, or the Missouri or whatever, and the Supreme Court currently, that sits on the bench in Washington, D.C., reaffirms Roe versus Wade and throws out the Alabama decision, the statute that they just created, went into law by the governor's signature, as unconstitutional. Now what do? You just had all this for nothing. And the problem here, Dan, is where are we going with this? Are we moving forward in Rhode Island to loosen up Roe versus Wade, to make it less restrictive what it is current statute? And that upsets the apple cart. We've had 47 years of stability, and I said that this bill has crossed the red line of neutrality. We've had
because of the word health and how it has been inserted into the language. Because really, the life and health of the mother is noted in Roe v. Wade, but in this particular Rhode Island legislation, health is completely undefined. And I think it's been a little bit of a reach by the pro-life folks to suggest that will give full license to third trimester abortions for flimsy health or mental health reasons, meaning a woman is just too stressed to have the baby. The numbers of third trimester abortions in this country, even in places where it's allowed, is just.
Dan, why go there?
Is this
exactly. Even
big.
why go there? Like I said before, don't change a period, a dot, a comma, a period, a word, a paragraph in the current.
You want to cut and paste Roe v. Wade.
That's it.
And put it in the Constitution. I mean, in the statutes.
Right.
In the state of Rhode Island.
Look, the pro-life.
So you are pro-choice by instinct here, correct?
Correct. And the pro-life people did not introduce not one piece of legislation this year to upset the apple cart, to unbalance a status quo neutrality. Switzerland, neutral. They don't get it. It's upsetting that this has caused divisiveness, has caused all sort of polarization. And what is the real agenda? Why so fanatical to protest? And I've been getting emails. You took away the right for a woman to choose. No, we did not. Right now, you can go and continue what you've been doing in Rhode Island for the last 47 years.
Well, there's a level of fanaticism on both sides of just about every issue right now.
Correct.
And I think it's disturbing to common sense citizens who are just looking for common sense leadership. The notion that this thing still sits, though, in the hopper is interesting. The Senate president in that clip more or less indicates that it is. The Senate president is pro-life. The Speaker of the House is pro-life. They did something which I think is countercultural to their leadership.
Diplomatic.
Which is, diplomacy is countercultural to their leadership. Because in general, and you know this to be true, you're a veteran, unless the Speaker or the Senate President are really into a piece of legislation, they very rarely let it go. They very rarely let the system bring it to the floor. So for them to step back with their no votes intact and let this dialogue go is really interesting. I think it's less to do with conscience and more to do with counting the votes on the progressive side. Don't you?
I also think
because they certainly aren't going to take. They're not going to. They're not going to take that method of leadership up on anything else. So it's interesting that he's saying more or less, that there's still light at the end of the tunnel. He's not burning to see that light because he doesn't believe that this legislation is necessary. He's a pro-life guy. So the politics of this are fascinating.
And it's part of diplomacy also. And what's fairness? What's fair to all Rhode Islanders? To all Rhode Islanders, to both sides of the aisle.
So do you think this thing can be reworked?
Of course it can be reworked.
All right, so when we come back, let's talk about how it gets reworked, okay? Stay with us. So the politics of this legislation, it was a good package that Eyewitness News did at the top, talking about the kind of revision process that would have to happen. Is there going to be some Senate discussion to revise a bill and pass it in the Senate Judiciary and put it to the floor of the Senate and then send it back to the House? Is that conversation going on?
It's the House version. Right now, the Senate version is dead. You only need one piece of legislation from either the House or the Senate to pass both chambers and be sent to the governor.
But what you voted on the Senate Judiciary Committee was
the Senate version.
Senate version.
Correct. Same duplicate of the House version. So the reason why Senator Ruggiero...
Wait a second. Were there two different versions running? I mean, the House...
Two identical bills. One House version from the House sponsor and one Senate.
They're the same bills.
Correct.
Same language.
Two bills.
I got that part. I mean, I get that part. But the Senate didn't pass it. So the Judiciary Committee has to revise, has to write something that it will pass and send it to the full Senate. Then send it back to the House.
The House version, correct. Right. And so it's going to be amended.
And then sent the Senate version to the House for the House to print it on its own paperwork.
Right. The Senate version is dead. It cannot be revised. It's the House version we're working on. We left the House version. We did not vote up or down on the House version. We held it for further study, which was a vote of 7-2, which I voted to hold it for further study to keep it alive. To keep it alive.
What was the difference between the House and the Senate version in language?
None. I think they were both identical. I think what happened was they amended the House version.
You want to know why people don't know what the hell's going on?
Well, it gets confusing, and the vision.
Excuse me, but anyway,
the version we had in front of the Senate was.
Is there gonna be a way to why am I getting angry at you?
Yes.
You're my buddy. Is there gonna be new language proposed and sent into the pipeline? Yes or no?
That's if both parties sit down and compromise, sit at the table.
Both parties being
both pro-life and pro-choice, the Senate sponsors of both sides, and even bring the House sponsors into the discussion and sit down at a table and find common language.
Try to get it done together.
Correct. We have plenty of time. We have over 6 weeks to get it done.
The politics of this thing are interesting.
Very.
You just gave me your phone. I don't want to. I don't have your code. I want to show that to me so I can read it. You just. We're loose here on this show, obviously.
Sure.
Oh, now I got your password. There goes your financial accounts.
Oh, a second, Dan. There it is, right here.
So this is something Lou just showed me. This just came to you today, right?
Correct.
an advertisement showing the 5 Senate Judiciary no votes. Last night's no vote reminds us we get to vote in 2020. Our issues, our votes, our choice. Why are you bothered by that? That's expected.
Well, I'm not bothered by that, but that's not a good way to negotiate. If you're going to negotiate with Senate Judiciary Committee, and you've got 5 people that you want to sit down with and try to find compromise, and every bill in Rhode
I don't
Island,
hear a lot of word compromise from the progressive left.
well,
on
there
this.
has to come to the
They
table.
want the language that they
Because
want.
what happens is, I think what will happen is, okay, so you're going to start campaigning for 2020. You're going to probably, some members, you're going to aggravate them. And you know what they're going to say? Forget it. We're not going to do nothing this year. We're not going to do nothing next year. So your first opportunity to try to pass this bill will probably be in 2021, probably around June of 2021. Now, you're going to roll the dice and see what happens in the Supreme Court. I wouldn't want that. I would compromise and sit down and negotiate in good faith, like we do on every issue, and find there is common language. Let both sides sit down at the table. They never have sat down. Have I seen a meeting where you have pro-life, pro-choice, the advocates, the senators that are sponsoring the current legislation, and then Senator Archibald, who's sponsoring an amendment to the current
You need
legislation?
a workshop.
Let's get it done.
You know what? And
Get
I hate to
6
bring it
weeks
to you.
get it
I
done.
hate to be
And I think we're gonna get it done, and it's gonna protect the woman's right for an abortion here in Rhode Island. We're gonna continue Roe versus Wade, and we're not gonna differ. We're not gonna go toward the pro-life. Not one word, not one sentence. Change it and restrict current Roe versus Wade.
Well,
That's my message.
Right now, you're getting accolades to the bishop. I think maybe for the wrong reasons. But the pro-life.
I'm trying to be fair and try to be honest and have both parties work together and move on in Rhode Island and keep I've always been for the status quo. And people have put words in my mouth that I'm
the
not.
status quo on Roe v. Wade.
Currently, what is in effect today.
We don't need status quo leadership in general. Status quo leadership on Roe v. Wade.
And Dan, we look beyond our borders, which we should not. Look, we keep bringing up Alabama. We legislate in the state of Rhode Island. We create our laws in the borders. They want to do something else, let them do something else. We are going to protect the right for a woman here in Rhode Island.
Right.
So
we shall stay tuned.
Thank you.
Thank you. State Senator Lou Raptakis. My dialogue in politics outside the show will be slowed. I'll tell you why next.